What led to Certa?
The thing that attracted me to Certa was the fact that I absolutely love productivity hacks.
At Certa, you started as an architect, then DOE, and then CTO, right? So typically that doesn't happen. People don't get. Most of the people, 99.9% of the folks, don't get to see that growth in one single organization. So how did
That's why
you made it
join
happen for
startups.
yourself?
I think that's why you join startups. You get avenues to explore, right?
You say hiring smarter engineers. How is the current mix like? People coming from tier 1, tier 2 colleges, tier 3 colleges, or product?
We don't really look at colleges I have higher dropouts. I love working with dropouts because they are not afraid to take this, and they've taken potentially the biggest risk.
Do you think it costs a company to hire one good engineer?
You can't put a price tag on a good engineer.
Your team is a global engineering team or mostly in India?
Largely in India, but we have engineers. We have had engineers in the UK, US as well.
There is a lot of debate going on around 40 hours, 100 hours work week wala. First, what is your typical work week? How many hours you are putting in?
I don't think we don't put a number on it, right? What we focus on is the impact that you're making throughout, right? So it was like a remote, somewhat of a remote place. So it was just like people were genuinely like very happy. There weren't any tech startups or anything like that. There was some crowd, but it just
है ना
felt-
वहाँ पे that lantern वाला पूरा
the lantern, and
right,
you've got
it's a
these
very
beautiful boats.
place,
Yeah,
correct.
it's a beautiful
Right.
place, and I just fell in love with it.
Yeah.
It's like that is the place I keep on. That is sort of my happy place, right? So it's amazing.
I was there for almost a week, I guess. It's actually Vietnam overall is a very beautiful place.
Absolutely.
Right. फिर वहाँ पर वो वाला जो एरिया है, जो cruise वाला, I forgot the name. It's around
It's
Hanoi.
Hanoi.
Right.
Hanoi ke paas there's a bay that
Right,
you can
right.
go for
Someday
the
that is
boat
also
rides
very
and
pretty.
everything. We were supposed to be there. There were some visa issues. Like I assume that the Vietnam visa is like because that's what you assume for most of the Asian countries, right?
Yeah.
That you end up going there and you'll get visa on arrival. I assume
Right.
that Vietnam also has a visa on arrival. I said, oh shit! At 3 a.m. I found that it needs an e-visa.
But वो immediately आ जाता है almost.
So I had to like move a few plans there because it was 3 a.m. You couldn't get an e-visa at 3 a.m. at any of these airports. So I ended up. So I haven't been to Hanoi. I've been to Ho Chi Minh, and then I went to Hoi An directly. Beautiful place.
My memory of that place is not. Well, it's actually good, but I feel bad for myself because at that point I was so extremely busy at that time. I think I was not able to fully enjoy it. The trip. I was almost everywhere. I was on call or doing something. I just thought, I'm not going to do a trip like this ever again.
I know. But what I found is when I go to these places where I plug out. Like I don't think about work. Like actively, I don't think about work. But when you're just I love technology, right?
Yeah.
I love the problem that we are solving there at Certa. And when I'm just sitting there, I'm chilling out, I get some peace, and passively your mind starts thinking about, okay, we should do this, and you just let it,
Right.
let your mind think about that passively, and that gives you so much clarity that when you come back from it, you're invigorated. You just start executing on new ideas.
Some of the best ideas or some of the best processes, approaches, anything, right? That it has never came up to me, at least thinking about it actively.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? वो हमेशा बहुत ही passive होता है, having a dinner somewhere, it's something just, I think it's in your subconscious mind, वो बस कहीं से आ जाता है अचानक से.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is what you should be doing. This is how it should be. And you're not even thinking about it. So I think that is very nice.
You need to give your mind, some space to breathe.
I have stopped thinking actively. यार अब बैठ करके ना मेरे को ये करना है, ये सोचते हैं. I have literally stopped doing that. I just kind of feed it to my subconscious mind. अब भाई तू सोच और मेरे को बता दियो जब समझ में आ जाए तो.
I think sleeping over problems is underrated.
Yeah, extremely underrated, right?
So people don't give it enough time. For me, I think whenever I am faced with a really big problem, I just let my mind think about it, get an 8 hours of sleep, and you'll get like super. By the next morning, you'll get some clarity on what the next steps need to
Yes,
be.
and it took me some time to get there. मुझे लगता है कि initially, I think maybe 5-6 years back, I used to sit in a silent place, 2-3 घंटे focus time अलग से रख दिया. Then it didn't work out of it. And I think ये भी ना बहुत ही it comes with time and experience.
Right.
जब अचानक से चीजें आने लग गए, realize कि यार I think I should not try too hard
Yes.
to do something. Just let it be, and things will fall in place.
Yes,
Right,
worrying
so-
around about a problem doesn't solve it.
Exactly,
Right? You need
right.
to be. You need to take steps, and you need to give your mind some space to breathe so that it can figure those out. Right. So, yes, subconscious mind is more powerful than what we
Right.
think
So
it is.
what has been, such exciting ऐसा ideas that has come to you, not thinking about it actively, but passively, it just came.
Yeah.
Doing some random stuff.
The most recent one is we recently re-architected the whole platform. So,
Acha.
to give you a bit of a background about Certa is a third-party risk management platform,
Yeah.
right? We work largely in the enterprise space, but also cater to digital natives, right? So, third-party risk management is about whenever you are an enterprise, you have this massive network
Right.
of vendors and third parties who are giving you some sort of supplemental services, and that enables you to focus on your own core product, right?
Right.
So what typically happens is that we have these regulations coming about, we have these sanctions that happen in the world.
Correct.
Right? So you need to continuously monitor your third party network for any potential breaches, right? Because that tends to distract you from your vision, and
Right.
there is a massive financial impact.
But when you talk about compliance management, ये क्या सिर्फ this is for particular market, or this is market
across
agnostic?
industries. This is
Okay.
across industries. Every industry has its own set of regulations. Every industry.
Right.
There are some universal regulations, like you would have like child labor regulation, forced labor. Those are all like across industries.
Certa has it for across all verticals. All
This is
industries,
Certa is a
all
very
geographies.
horizontal product. Like it's very easy for us to scale to like new industries and new compliances, like really
More of a
easily.
plug and play kind of a solution. कि यार
exactly.
compliance उसमें plug in करो, and then
Yes, you need to
Right.
just tell us like what kind of compliances do you need to be aligned with, and Certa can quickly create a process for you. That is the idea. So what we need, so since you're working with enterprises, what you need to do is enterprises have their own set of processes, right?
Correct,
and
right.
you
And
can't
very
go to
rigid
them and like
sometimes.
we have this one size fits all solution, right?
Right.
You need to be very flexible into
Right.
adopting their
Correct,
processes.
correct.
So we've created a underlying workflow and rule engine that can quickly adapt to any kind of processes, right? Any kind of risk management processes that can integrate with any data providers and systems and everything. So just a few days ago, we were running into these issues where when you're looking with extreme complex business rule coupled with a lot of data, you tend to get slightly scaling challenges about, okay, how do you continuously monitor this data? Because you need to continuously monitor those third parties, right? And a single third party can have like thousands of directors. One of those directors, if 10 of them are Russian, then you suddenly need to figure out, we need to figure out, okay, how do we take care of this problem right now? There would be sanctions tomorrow. This whole process needs to be like quick and really agile. And traditionally, this whole domain has been more manual than automated. So Certa is there to, our goal is to, enable companies to do good business with each other, right? That is the primary motto that we have. And for that to happen, we need to be really agile.
Correct.
So we created this platform, and that agility coupled with complex business rules, coupled with a lot of data, we ended up running into a few scalability challenges, right? Just during one of my vacations last year, I was in California thinking about the product and everything, and it's a beautiful place, right? This is like, it's like paradise on earth, right? So I just had this idea of figuring out, okay, how do we scale it to the next chapter and decouple some of these problems into more like independently scalable pieces. So can't talk too much about it, but yes, we independently, some of that, I figured out, okay, how do I independently scale that problem? This was the most recent. I think it was the most impactful thing that we have built in a while. And this is like, we are currently in the grind of figuring it out. We have built the whole solution. We are just now getting it adopted for our current and like for the new customers and the old customers. So
Right.
that was one of the ideas that ended up coming.
The nice, very. मुझे लगता है कि most of those challenging ideas typically
हाँ,
comes like this. वो
absolutely.
actively आता भी नहीं है कभी.
Yes, that your brain really needs, like every once in a while, get some time. I think founders do this a lot, where you some of the most influential founders that you come across take these 15 days
Right.
sort of remote retreats
Correct.
where they don't plug into anything related to the company, and I think that's really essential,
Very important, right?
because you need to let your mind calm down and then you let it ideate, and then I think giving it some time there really helps. So
Right. But yeah, I think even for that to happen, for giving you that 15 days retreat, you need to have, uh, you know, uh, number two, who is able to, manage all day-to-day hassles and day-to-day
Yes.
firefighting, who can do that. So,
yeah, I think it's really important for leaders to make themselves redundant.
Exactly.
Actively make themselves.
that's the whole idea. If you can't make yourself redundant, I don't think
Yes.
you are the leader.
Yes, you become a bottleneck, right?
Yes.
And that's like, it's to some extent it's nonsensical. If you're a bottleneck for every decision that your team has to make, every decision making gets stalled, and you never get to think about the larger vision.
Exactly.
And you never get time. It's not a growth opportunity, right? It becomes, you not only become a bottleneck, but once you actively try to make yourself redundant, you make sure that you identify people who can take on your responsibilities, and it's a growth opportunity for them.
Correct.
To elevate themselves. And if you're not doing that for a startup, that's like super essential. You need to find people, you need to continuously give them opportunities to challenge themselves, so you can elevate yourself as a leader as well, right? You, at some point, you need to start focusing on bigger and better things.
Right.
What new product lines you can create, and what new initiatives that you can take to take your customer success to the next level. So that's what a leader is for, in my opinion.
Right, but see, talking about founders, it makes sense. But unfortunately, I have seen a lot of managers or leaders who want to become a bottleneck, who want to have that dependency on themselves, who want to
Right.
become a single point of failure.
Right.
Somehow they feel that by doing this, they'll have a more stronger and a firm position that they are holding, and
Right.
nobody will replace them. So what do you think about that?
I don't think that's accurate. It's
Why do people do that?
so I think people confuse being redundant with being disposable.
Yeah.
Right. Two very different
Correct,
things. When you're
correct.
thinking about disposable, you end up thinking that if I don't put myself as a bottleneck, the company will let you go. But see, inherently, why, if you are adding value to the company, why would a company think about letting you
Right.
go? Right. You need to figure out, okay, what are the bigger and better ways I can add value, right? And when you're thinking in that regard, you have to, if you're just doing the same thing, there's no growth for you, right? You're just slowing down things after one point. You need to figure out, how can I really start speeding things up, and for that to happen, you need to just figure out the next layer. You continuously give them growth opportunities. People see what's there for them, they would work
Yeah.
twice as hard
Right.
to make sure that you are achieving the vision, that you can then focus on setting the vision, and your team can focus on achieving that vision,
Right.
and
But I
you
think
create a very strong culture there.
Yeah.
And that is the
Yeah.
that is the lifeblood of
I
a
think that
startup.
goes back to the founders or the CEOs as well.
Right.
So very interesting chat I was having, with one of the CTOs of one of the unicorns in India. So it's a huge, big company leading a team of around 400, 500 engineers.
Right.
And what he said that he did such a good job, he made himself completely redundant, and then the CEO came to him one day and told him कि यार तू करता ही क्या है. So he went on 15-day leave, right? And he figured out, CEO को लगा कि यार everything is running
Working,
very
yeah.
smoothly, so I don't need this person. And when he came back, so he completely these guys had some conflict, some argument कि कौन क्या करता है, कैसे करता है, right? So that's what will you say for that?
I think it becomes, when you become redundant, you are still needed, because becoming redundant is a long process. It's not like you tell people that they do it
और मुझे क्या लगता
and
है
they'll
ना,
take care of
it
it.
goes back to the founder, क्योंकि
हाँ.
अभी ना उस founder को लग रहा है कि this person is not needed, that machinery is running for 15 days, that will probably run for 1 month, 2 month, 3 month,
हाँ.
but 3 महीने के बाद it will start falling down.
You'll see friction coming up because you need to oil that machine
Exactly.
every once
It's a
in a while.
continuous process. ये
Yes.
नहीं कि एक बार कर दिया वो हो गया.
हाँ.
Process बनाना तो it's a very easy job.
हाँ.
Right? Process monitor करना and ensuring that process
Exactly.
is running with similar efficiency over and over again. That is the most challenging
It's
part.
not like making yourself redundant isn't super hands off. It's like you tell people that they need to do something, you see how they're doing it, and then you continuously groom them to eventually completely take over. It's
Right.
not something that you just do it from now on you are the problem
Right,
solver, I'm out.
I think you're still running the show. Think of it as an orchestra. जो,
Yes, exactly.
वो करता है. But still, although बाहर से देख करके लगेगा that person is not required, but that team of entire 100 people will be irrelevant if that person is not there.
People,
right?
you're there for conflict resolution. You're still there for, because there are always going to be new problems that you as an individual face. So
Right.
even as a leader, you continuously get all of these new problems. Sometime down the line, your people will end up getting the same set of problems, and you need to at that point give your guidance to them to make sure they're equipped to handle that problem properly, instead of just otherwise they'll overheat, they'll figure out some other they might not be thinking in the long term or something, and you end up with from there on the decline starts. So a leader job is there to more often than not monitor and set a vision.
Right, and hold everything together, being that bridge between
absolutely
different stakeholders.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's been.
So so I was going through your profile on LinkedIn. From the very beginning, I think you have been either part of the founding team, started couple of startups, did couple of startups, then started Certa. So ये startup का, is it something that comes from the family background? You belong to a business family?
Not at all. I come from very humble beginnings. So startups was a get rich quick scheme for me.
Okay.
In my infancy, it was not really. But so when I started off college, it was like I'll just engage with different projects here and there. I used to work with seniors for a couple of projects, and that was a way for me to get money, because I wanted to sustain myself and the family, right? And one thing led to another. I joined this startup from one of the seniors. That was just it was an e-commerce, like an enablement platform that we started off, and it was just purely a way to sustain myself. But I found I had been like a bit of a geek since the very beginning. So I found that connect with technology. So I've been all over the place in terms of the tech stack, right? I started off as a front-end engineer, moved on to back-end, then mobile, and then infrastructure. So based on what was the need of the hour, just switched between these 4 or 5 domains, and kept on just shuttling myself between these two to get like a more holistic understanding of the whole technology scene. Right. So that led to the growth in the first startup. And we became like it was a SaaS platform. So it was like really eng driven rather than, product or marketing driven. So that sort of led to where I am right now. And I think that's it. The whole approach has just been to find bigger and better things to do.
What led to Certa? Certa is, is a very specific and a very niche industry and market that you guys are serving to.
Right.
Compliance वाले side. So you or your co-founders had some prior experience in this domain, या फिर it just came?
So our CEO and founder, I'm not really co-founder at Certa, but I like to think of myself as a way that is what ESOPs are for. You sort of look at it as a part owner, but I like to think of myself as an integral part of the team. And what happened there is the first startup got acquired by one of the largest media companies in India, and we went from a tech centric to a tech enabled one, right? Two very different cultures,
Absolutely.
Right? It's like a massive cultural shock, and it wasn't like it just happened that when you went into that zone, you try to still work through.
It's not possible, I guess. It's like oil and water. You can't mix.
People
it's not. In tech enabled can't really go to tech centric and vice versa.
Right.
It's
so
very difficult.
I ended up trying to really grind there for 2 years, but it was like that hunger for getting more FaceTime with the clients, to get more involved in sales and everything, that was unsaturated, right? So since we were in a pretty stable state with the large conglomerate, we ended up, I started looking out into a more like a more challenging tech problem,
Yeah.
right? And since I had gone through all these bureaucratic hurdles, I thought that now I just want to code.
Right.
I don't want to do any people management or
I can
strategy.
imagine. I can imagine that, it's sahi hai. Right.
So I ended up becoming an architect there.
Okay.
And the thing that attracted me to Certa was the fact that I absolutely love productivity hacks, right? Whenever you look at something that has some kinks here and there, you want to iron out those kinks, right? You want to make a really smooth running machine through it. And I saw there were some efficiencies that, can be potentially done in the processes. So I started getting myself involved there. And I think in 6 months, I was sort of the director of engineering there.
Actually, stopping you there. So your journey at Certa, you started as an architect, then DOE, and then CTO, right? So typically that doesn't happen. People don't get, most of the people, 99.9% of the folks, don't get to see that growth in one single organization. Right. And they typically have to switch multiple companies for every role change. So how did
That's
you
why you
made it
joined
happen for
startups.
yourselves?
I think that's why you join startups. You get avenues to explore, right? And we had since the very beginning, we had a very open culture in Certa.
Yeah.
Like you don't stop people from exploring something new, right? If they want to do it, like who are we to stop? Right?
How big was your team when you joined Certa?
25.
And when you became DOE?
I think we were closer to 50.
And now?
Now we are 200 plus.
Wow.
Right. So
that's crazy. It's not that you are CTO, with 25 or 50 folks. That's almost 10x growth, that you have seen.
Yeah. So this is sort of organically, just as the company grew, my responsibilities ended up growing, right? So that was the idea, right? When I was coming from an enabled startup into a more tech-centric startup. Yeah. So obviously, like in this kind of a startup where you're focusing on, that is roadmap is largely driven by the engineering team, right? Your product is largely driven by the engineering team. It is organically, if you have that business sort of mindset, you end up, your role sort of starts growing automatically, right? So I started off with just principal architecture. I started off figuring out, okay, there are some kinks there. Let me iron those out. And that made the whole process pretty efficient. I got more and more people involved because I wanted to work with, smarter and smarter engineers, right? It was my hunger to work with smarter engineers. So I got involved in the recruiting processes as well. And that led to sort of expanding the role from coding and architecture into a bit more tactical role.
So when you say hiring smarter engineers, how is the current mix like? People coming from tier 1, tier 2 colleges, tier 3 colleges, or product or service companies?
I think, I believe I am the only one in my team that is from a tier 1 college at this point. Right. And BHU, my college is IT BHU, and it's like a very humble college, right? Because we just back in 2010 or 11 we first became the IT, so we come from like those humble beginnings continue to stay with me, right? We don't really look at colleges like I have higher dropouts. I love working with dropouts because they are not afraid to take risk. I mean, they've taken potentially the biggest risk in their lives, and it's absolutely refreshing to work with some of the people. So I don't think background or the college matters. I think your inherent characteristics, what you are as a person, matter more than where you're coming from. Right? So that has sort of been my hiring strategy throughout. You want to search for people who have hunger to solve problems, right? And the two kind of people that I typically hire is one who are really excited about tech, or people who are really excited about business aspects, right? You need a very healthy mix of both of these individuals, right? So one of them, the first one, you get down on the path of being an architect, and the other ones you get on the path of becoming
more
a problem
team
solver.
Management, right?
Yes, team management or product management, whatever. They get on calls with the customers. Like every engineer should definitely get FaceTime with the customer. That is like super important for any edge-driven startup, right? So these people figure out problems that customers have. They are able to, think out of the box about customer problems, and then the technologists, they sort of figure out of the box solutions for new and exciting tech opportunity. So you need a very healthy mix, and that's what we have been typically focused on:
Nice.
solutioning plus technologists.
Good to hear that you have been able to crack it and able to scale almost.
We're still cracking it. I don't think it's
4-5
done.
years.
Yeah, we're still trying to crack it, honestly. At the end, recruiting process tends to go through like it has a cyclical loop. So we sometimes look for people who are pure technologists. Like for the last 2 years, our approach has been that let's focus on technologists, and then now our approach is to look at people who are just as good at solutioning as well. So it just goes like
What is the selection or joining ratio out of, let's say, X interviews that you guys take? How many people typically end up getting offered, and how many people typically end up joining?
I think we have a ridiculous rejection rate, because we have super selective in terms, and it affects the like, it does show up like because the team really wants to get more and more people, the work isn't reducing, right? The work keeps on increasing, right? So we are very selective. So our rejection rate has been pretty high, even in the HR rounds. Like we have, our HRs are so aligned with the engineering team that they understand exactly what engineers are looking for, right? So our rejection rate has been, I think, less than 10%. Rejection rate, acceptance rate in the first round itself has been less than 10%.
Okay.
Right. And then recruiting, easily, I think 60% drop off in the first processes, like are rejected in each of these rounds.
Right.
So it's like maybe 1-2% is we eventually.
What's the number? How many interviews do you guys take?
Yeah, every week
for one selection.
Easily close to 100 sort of interviews.
100 interviews. Oh my God.
Absolutely. So most of the work is honestly done by the HR teams, right? They have been super selective. So
I'm talking about technical interviews.
I'm not talking about the technical interviews.
These are the HR interviews.
These are exclusively.
And how many tech interviews?
Tech interviews are significantly less. They are like we get every week we take 4 or 5 sort of interviews.
Your HR team is doing a pretty good job.
Yes, they are working really hard to really sort of recruit, and we keep on asking them to hire more and more positions, and they are still grinding it out. I absolutely love the HR team that we have.
A lot of people, a lot of companies, they obsess a lot about tier 1 colleges or product se hi hire karna hai, service se nahi karna hai. Then why do they are so obsessed for this? One, is it because they don't know kaise karna hai, ya fir they want to filter out as many?
It's an okay first filter, right? I feel like, because when the assumption is that tier 1 will always attract the best talent. It's the cream of the crop. That's not the case. It's like India is such a large demographic that you'll find every kind of people in all kinds of colleges, right? So it's not just about the theoretical knowledge that gets you into an IIT. It's also about what kind of individual you are, right? So that has been sort of what our strategy has been, that college should not matter as much as what they have been doing and what. So one of the things that we try to figure out in hiring is to see what they have done, like how well do they know the internals of what they have done, right? How deep did they go into the problem to actually figure out okay, how do I solve this? So detail orientation matters a lot.
But for these companies, बहुत सारे candidates, they complain, and they feel left out. At least we should get an opportunity. But
absolutely.
But even if you look from the employer perspective, they can't interview 1,000 folks. So there has to be some filtration parameter at their end as well.
You send like some sort of preliminary questionnaire, right? You can't interview, like it's not
but that is again an expensive process, na? Even if typically if you send an assessment.
Hiring good people isn't cheap.
Right, yeah.
Good people won't come at like low cost for either, right? So the smartest engineers out there, they might not be from IITs, but they might be earning more than.
How much do you think it costs a company to hire one good engineer?
It is in the $2,000 to $3,000 range easily.
I think that's a little bit on a lower side.
easily in that range, right? If you're hiring for an SD to SD3, that is the range. But if you're going more, there's sky's the limit there. Honestly, you can't put a price tag on a good engineer.
And that's why typically, companies do that filtering to lower those costs.
Exactly. And you talked about the product versus services engineers as well. But some of the best engineers that I've hired are coming from services background. Right? We have this guy in our team who, when we initially hired him, this guy was working in a service-based company in Rohtak or in that region, or Dehradun. This guy was he was working in a service domain, but he had tremendous side projects. He was like a core, like plugged in geek and everything. I absolutely loved the guy. Right? I hired him. Like I was a call with him. I hired him. And
if he's listening to this, he'll probably ask for 100% hike next time.
I think he's pretty happy. He's like a super grounded engineer, and he's like
good.
Absolutely, he leads a team and he leads a complete squad. And smartest, one of the smartest people there. So I don't think you need to put this filtration, that service and product. Yes, you can be a bit more critical there, but if you'll find a diamond.
So I remember, when we were last speaking, so your entire team is remote, right?
Yes.
Now everyone, abhi kuch din pehle I heard that Amazon, Google, everyone is, moving to 5 days work from office mode. Right. And you guys have been advocating remote for almost forever now, and is still working in that mode.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are you guys doing, magical process which is working for you guys and it's working well, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's working quite well. So I think it's a two-way relationship. Every employer-employee relationship, it's a two-way street, right? On the employer's end, what you need to promise people is trust, autonomy, and growth, right? On the employee's end, you need to find people, like you need to make sure that you have ownership, accountability. Right? Those are like super important. So those are the characteristics that each side needs to showcase. Now there's also the fact that how do you ensure success in a team, right? So what we have found is there are little bits, there's some processes that we do internally. A few things that really work is that we ask everyone to turn on the cameras. No one wants to talk to a screen, right? You forget that there's a human on the other side. So you need to see the human on the other side.
So people know that, if the call is happening, I have to be on camera.
Yes,
so that is at least one thing. You have to be actually working.
Exactly.
Kahin se bhi call utha karke,
if people are at the gym and they have a huddle going on, they have flexible working schedule. So we have like at 10:30 a.m. people would be at the gym, they'll be picking up calls. I'm out for a walk with my dog, I'll be picking up calls, I'll be turning on my camera, right? And it's fine if you don't want to turn it on. Just let the team know that, hey, I'm just having dinner, I don't want to turn on the camera right now. And that's fine, right?
But sometimes it's okay, but majority should be on.
Yes, it should be an exception, right?
And what if someone is not switching it on again and again?
Yeah, that has happened, but people eventually fall in line in that regard because they understand. And it's like you need to have a very transparent conversation. See, our point is that turning on the camera ensures that you talk to the human on the other side, and you get to see the expressions when you're bouncing off ideas.
There are no assumptions, right?
Exactly.
So ये नहीं लग रहा कि यार tone से कुछ you're deducing something from the tone while the person is smiling on the screen.
So there's less subtext that you need to figure out. So that has really helped. So just having that transparent conversation helps a lot, right? So that is one process that we have been doing a lot, right? Then we do frequent hacker houses. Sort of we get the whole team in a room and we try to brainstorm, or we physical on-site, right? We go to
how frequently you guys do that?
We try to do it every quarter, right? And that
more of a workation kind of a stuff.
Yes, you hack around, and then at the end you have demo day where the engineers would be showcasing the work, that all the good work that they did. So they really imbue the concept of like ownership and accountability there. They know how to showcase their work, right? And then that is the hacker houses are second thing. Then you need to be like, over communication is the key in the mode, right? You cannot assume that something is clear. That first principles thinking is like top down and bottom, like it needs to be at every layer of the organization in everything that you do. So
Right,
you
even
document-
small details, just ask or confirm, don't assume.
Yes,
यार, ये
never
तो यही
assume.
होगा. Correct.
Exactly, because and people definitely make mistakes. You just have to be, and you
Just don't repeat the same mistake again
that's
and
right,
again. As
that's
long
the
as you're
idea.
not doing that, it's okay.
You are allowed to make mistakes. You should be making mistakes, because that is like, if you are going to experiment, you're going to make mistakes,
Correct,
right?
correct.
So you should be able to. You should just ensure that you don't do the same mistakes twice. The other thing that we really encourage our team to do is take moonshots. That is like a moonshot is just like, you take on a really big undertaking, right? But you need to have a plan, right? You can't just take an undertaking and say, okay, I want to build this without any research, and you need to
It
figure
should
out,
be
okay,
outcome oriented. Ki, you know
yes.
what's the value it's creating and why you are doing it.
Exactly.
Not just because you want to do something and you're
exactly.
doing it without any
Exactly.
start or end.
So what you end up doing is, when you take that moonshot, there's like, it's a very entrepreneurial
Yeah.
thing, right? Taking a moonshot, right? Because you need to, if your moonshot is failing, you need to figure out plans. As you're falling down, you have to figure out, okay, where do I create a parachute from?
Right.
So that really inculcates an entrepreneurial spirit, and that just really makes the culture together and experiment friendly. That is like super important in my that works really well.
Your team is a global engineering team or mostly in India?
Largely in India, but we have engineers. We have had engineers in the UK, US as well. So there are, obviously, since our audience is largely US based, we typically hire a few engineers in the US for FaceTime with the clients and everything to get on one-on-one calls, because it's not fair for the Indian, in my sense, like it's not always fair for the engineers to work in like remote hours and everything. What you can ask
and
them.
I think it also, when you're working typically with US or UK clients, it also the value also kind of multiplies when you have people from the similar geography. It's not just for US UK. When you're working in the MENA region, you would ideally want someone from the similar culture and similar geography, because you know the nuances and what
the culture matters.
Culture matters a lot.
So what I found in the US is that the small talk is really important.
Correct, right.
Indian audiences like really get to the point. It's very cut to cut sort of conversation. So engineers in the US, they know how to do that. You don't have to force anything like
and they have some relevant or common stuff to talk about as well. They can talk about weather, right? You can't talk about weather sitting in Delhi and sitting in California. Right? So that's how it is. Correct.
Now I think for the Indian engineers, it's easier than ever to actually start doing the small talk, because you go on Perplexity, figure out what state they are in, and just ask them like, what are the things that I can talk about. It's like stupidly simple right now. It's so that is one of the ways. But Indian engineers,
again, for that is something you need to learn and train yourself.
You want to do it.
It doesn't come naturally, right? So we are not like that. So we get even if you go to a sales call with some product that you want to kind of subscribe for, you would want to get directly to the point. Yeah, मेरे को पता है कैसे use करता है, मेरे को बताओ what's the cost, what's the implementation time. You don't want to go through those 20 presentations.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Hey, if you want to do it, you'll figure out ways to do it. That's it, right? Perplexity is just like AI has just made things easier,
much easier. But in US, if they would want they want to understand things in much detail before making a decision. Right. So that is right. Talking about there is a lot of debate going on around 40 hours, 100 hours work week wala. First, what is your typical work week? How many hours you are putting in?
I don't think we don't put a number on it, right? What we focus on is the impact that you're making throughout, right? And that matters more than the seat hours to us, right? So there's also the reason for talking about impact within the company. What that ensures is that people really understand what they're working on, they care about it, and they're excited about it. And once you get into that zone, once your people are aligned with that idea, the number of hours become immaterial. If they care about it, they'll go above and beyond without you asking.
Correct.
Right? So I think asking people to work additional hours should be an exception. It shouldn't be the norm. right? Because that's
And
unfair.
I think you should do something that you don't have to ask for it.
Yes,
If you have to ask for it again, that means that ownership and accountability is missing. There are two things: either you have hired the wrong people, or
yes,
either the
absolutely.
process or something else is wrong.
Absolutely. That's
Right?
definitely there. There's also there's the cultural aspect, but I think there's also scientific research has shown this, that over getting people overworked tends to leads to a decline in productivity. So
Correct.
if you're not oriented towards the culture, if you're not super culture oriented, at least look at the scientific research to get that sense. But I don't see any reason why you should ever ask people to work 100 hours, 80 hours, 70 hours. It's not sustainable. It's just people tend to burn out. They tend to blame the company for getting overworked. They don't get to spend time with their families. It's not fair to
Right.
anyone, right? So,
But I
give
think
people
again,
enough
it's an
freedom.
individual's choice as well. What is what is more fulfilling for them,
Exactly.
right? So whatever works for them, I think that is also
It should be your choice. It shouldn't be
yes, it
forced
should be,
upon
right.
you.
It shouldn't be imposed. Nothing
Right.
should be imposed actually.
Exactly.
Right. But again, if you are now, let's say there are two people, right? One, let's say there are two engineers in your team. One who wants to have a super work-life balance, right? And the second who really enjoys working, who is putting in 80, 90 hours of work week, right? And both are SD2s, let's say for instance, right? Creating similar outcome per day or per working hours. Now the worst person who is obviously putting in, let's say 70, 80 hours and who is mad about it, and you are not imposing it. He's just
Right.
doing it by his choice. कुछ एक उठाया पहले का टेक डेट और पूरा रीआर्किटेक्ट करके सॉल्व कर दिया. And the other person who is, uh, creating that work-life balance for himself or herself. So obviously the other person who is putting in 100 hours will be creating more outcome, more output for you as a company than the other person,
Right.
right? So don't you think now the other person sometimes क्या होता है 40 hours वाला will complain कि यार मेरे को वो growth नहीं मिली, मेरे को वो promotion नहीं मिला, then why
Outcomes,
does that happen?
that is sort of the outcomes sort of situation, right? And if both are producing the same outcome, then I'll take the 40 hours guy over the 80 hours guy.
Obviously, right.
But if you're not, if there's obviously a massive outcome,
Yes, and it has to be massive. It doesn't have to be incremental. Then it
Exactly.
doesn't make sense. It means you're stupid.
Exactly. What
I shouldn't say that, but
yes. But what I've seen is that typically overworking yourself is unsustainable. So what usually happens is that you as a leader have to continuously step in to figure out, okay, are you fine? Is it affecting your work-life balance? Are you getting burnt out? Because when people are burnt out, they might not be thinking straight. It affects your culture in negative ways then.
Yeah,
right?
right.
So you need to continuously monitor that it's not affecting the culture in any ways. Because some people might look at this individual who's continuously overworking themselves and they feel like, okay, this is the culture, but it's not, right? It's always, you have to
again
just
an
keep on,
assumption.
you just have to keep on reiterating that as long as you're making impact, we don't care about the number of hours you're working.
Right.
So that's been sort of my strategy.
And how about, in remote, typically there were a lot of instances jahan pe that work and personal, those lines
They
blurred, right?
Yes.
Right, they blur a lot. So how do you, typically solve for that? And is this happening still post-COVID era, or this has
It's still happening. It even happens with me sometimes, right?
Okay.
So what we have found is, what I have personally found that works for me, and each individual works differently, but what I find really that works for me is that you need to isolate your personal and office life as much as you can. You can go to co-working spaces. In my case, I created a separate office space.
Right.
Is completely different from all my personal space, right? So that is one way that I found the balance to work. But those lines tend to easily get blurred, and you need to be proactive in figuring out how I can resolve some of these issues, because you can't. It's difficult to turn off your brain at thinking about work.
See,
right?
talking about flexible, since like you mentioned that in your team people have that flexibility to choose their working hours.
Yeah.
So doesn't it become more taxing? Let's say someone wants to work in the evening time,
Right.
They are more productive at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. But the team they are working with, they end up at 6. They don't want to work after that. So doesn't it get a little bit, confusing and
I
taxing
mean,
for the teams?
see, you need to figure out how to make your teams like individuals independent of each other, right? They need to be working on things. So once a day, get on syncs.
Right.
Absolutely.
But teams you can make individual, but not the engineers. Within teams as well, within one team, let's say there are 4 folks, and those 4 person have different working hours preferences. So how do you solve for that?
I think you play on everyone's strength, right? So, as an example, if someone is working on is more comfortable working in the US hours, get them on calls with clients. Right?
Yeah.
Simply, that's what their KRA. Then you mold around their working
Move them
hours,
to a
right?
different team.
Yeah, you move them to a different team, or even like in my head, like it shouldn't. You don't need continuous connects with your team, right? Your team should be empowered. That's where redundancy comes in, right? Your individuals should be empowered to make a few decisions themselves.
Right.
And once a day, like during the huddles, you sync up on your problems for the day and trust them to execute independently throughout
Making this
the day.
entire team async, basically.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Being async is like super important. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So they need to be like really independent of each other, and you need to figure out how to play on their strengths and their working preferences.
Why should somebody join Certa?
I
Talking
think-
about engineers primarily, yeah.
I think we are working on some of the hardest engineering problems in the enterprise SaaS space. You are getting to look at complex business problems. You do not just get to solve engineering challenges. It's a very versatile team where the more you want to get connected to the business, you decide how much you want to get connected, right?
Yeah.
And you get to decide whether you want to work on technological issues or do you want to work more on the business side. You want to understand that, right? We have a flexible, like super flexible team, right? And obviously, we have been remote since 2017, so we have really cracked that code on how to make
what works, what
teams
doesn't.
productive, right? Other than that, you'll find Certa is one of the most supportive group of engineers and individuals across the board, not just engineers, but everyone across the board is super supportive. We actually really care about your growth because if you're not growing, that is not the kind of people that we want to hire, where you don't want to grow, you don't want to see what's next for your career. How do you make that jump? And we do not we encourage our people to explore rather than asking. It's always asking for forgiveness is better than asking for permission, right? So that is some of the philosophy that we have really embraced throughout. And obviously, I think it's one of the strongest culture that I have seen in Indian ecosystem. Even our CEO is from the US, and he is really tuned into the culture of the team. Whenever I raise an issue to him, he is like all over the cultural bits. And if all of this is not enough, just look at my personal growth, right?
Yeah, right.
I've been over and over time, I've been given opportunities to experiment. I've failed multiple times. I'm not saying there have been massive blunders on my end, but every time I just haven't done the same mistake over and over again. It has led to tremendous growth in my own career opportunity, and that is the thing that I want to ensure within the team as well. So through and through, the culture is something that goes top down, right? So as leaders, if you are good leaders, I think that is the sort of startup that you should join.
Right.
Look at the leaders, figure out what kind of work they are doing, figure out their thought process. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But you should at least understand what you're, getting into. It's fair to ask for that.
Awesome. Now, in startups, typically, जो salary होता है, it's a mix of fixed plus ESOPs, right? And Indian startup ecosystem is quite mature now. People, in my experience, I have seen that people typically consider ESOP as more gimmicky, right? And which doesn't typically convert eventually. And so how do I'm sure you guys must be giving out ESOPs as well, right?
Yeah.
But if it converts, the windfall is massive. But how about those 99% of the times when it actually doesn't convert?
I think ESOP should be look like an investment, right? So I'll tell you both the aspects from a company's perspective and from an individual's, right? For an individual, ESOPs are like it's skin in the game, right?
Yeah.
You are not hired hands. You are part owners of the company.
Correct.
Right? And when you see that, there's obviously, you want to get to know what kind of metrics are there, what kind of fundamentals are there, right? So you get transparency into how the company is doing, right?
Right.
And as an employee, that is, you can't put a price on that, right? You get to where you clearly get a sense of how the company is doing, what kind of leaders do we have, right? Compare that with the stock market, right? In stock market, you are still investing on someone else's guidance, but over here you get to see the real time work that the team is doing. You get to connect with the leaders. You get to really understand the problem at its core.
Right, but I think that's the advantage of being in a startup, right?
Yes.
Not ESOPs.
So ESOPs warrant that you get some sort of transparency about the metrics, right? Vision is separate, but the fundamental metrics of a company, the financials, all of those matter as well.
But from the employee perspective, people who have spent a decade in the ecosystem or 7-8 years, they have seen similar, incidents jahan pe they have been offered ESOPs, but either they have not been converted, वो buyback नहीं हुआ है, वो liquidity का option नहीं मिला है, या फिर कंपनी बंद हो गई है, या फिर liquidity का option मिला है, तो that strike rate was so high that that actual जो value था उसका it reduced to almost 30-40% of the original value.
Yes, the taxation in India for ESOPs is a bit too high, but I think ESOPs is all about how you want to manage the risk and reward ratio, right? You can look at it, I can get a high salary and lower number of ESOPs, in which case you have put in less risk, you have reduced the risk, your reward will obviously be lower, right? You can increase the risk with ESOPs, right?
Right.
And don't do it like blindly, right? You need to talk to the leaders, talk and understand what their vision is, how the company is doing. It is very, it's a fair demand from an employee perspective who is leaning heavily on ESOPs to ask for questions. If you're not asking the question, you're getting into it blindly, and I think that is one of the problems.
One question here. So, lot of candidates, again, from my experience, what I have seen, they typically want ESOP as an additional
over and above.
Right. It doesn't have to, let's say if my current CTC is, let's say 20, तो ये नहीं हुआ कि यार मेरे को तुम 20 दे दो प्लस 20 का ESOP दे दो. They would want कि ठीक है मेरे को फिक्स तो मुझे 30 चाहिए ही चाहिए. उसके ऊपर ESOP दोगे तो भी चलेगा, नहीं दोगे तो भी चलेगा, लेकिन it's more of companies try to make it more lucrative.
Yes.
I just saw a post on LinkedIn jahan pe somebody mentioned they are looking to hire engineers with 2 to 3 years experience with 40 LPA cost to company, 20 fixed and 20 ESOPs. So again, what do you think, how candidates typically feel about this?
I think it's the employee's choice, how much do they want, right? CTC is not a metric that I have ever looked at for companies. So there's something that is like base compensation that is absolutely non-negotiable, right? So you try to get to a mutual understanding of that number, and anything over and above that, you can talk in terms of ESOPs. If you're hiring for a really expensive resource, obviously you have to lean into ESOPs a bit more. But it should be, the employee needs to figure out what kind of risk are they comfortable with. It's their choice. It shouldn't be a company forcing their decision on anyone at this point.
That is actually a very good approach, as long as they can decide how they want to structure this.
Absolutely.
This is, let's say this is total 100, you decide how much you want as fixed, how much you want as ESOP. That is actually a very good approach. But typically, बहुत सारी companies, see, there is a problem with employer as well in India, right? जहाँ पे they try to take advantage of this situation कि यार ESOP का value बढ़ा करके making it sound more
lucrative.
Sometimes, and I think there are some poor players, bad players in the market, जिसके कारण वो overall perspective and impression खराब होता है. Employees should not do that as well.
So I think ESOPs के लिए there's a massive people need to understand some of the essential terms when they are given ESOPs, right? You need to figure out what kind of strike price is there.
Correct.
You need to figure out what kind of vesting schedule is there.
नहीं करते. Companies don't even give the strike price. The strike price they'll announce, at the time of vesting.
You can obviously defer it.
Right?
So you can obviously defer it. Companies have all the ways to defer it, but you should be you should be demanding it, because it is the way for you to figure out, okay, what the financial gain looks like in the end, right? So you need to figure out the projections, okay, what is the company valuation looking at, what is the company valuation looking at for each of these series. You need to figure out what kind of liquidity events are there, right? All of these questions are like really essential when you're looking
Correct.
at ESOPs. Yes.
हाँ, but वही अभी I'll tell you ना, when I was working before Sunday Labs, so one of the companies I was working with, so I had some ESOPs. वहाँ पर the value of the ESOP was roughly around $1,500 per share,
Got
and
it.
the strike price was $1,000.
हाँ.
Right, so ठीक है, जब वो 10x होगा तब होगा, but at its current value it's not $1,500 ना, फिर it's actually $500.
हाँ.
Right, so
you need to figure out those financials. So that is the knowledge of the ESOP that you need to have. There are other instruments as well. People need to be aware of these instruments.
Don't you think there should be some regulation around this as well?
Absolutely. I think
Because
we should be looking at something.
If that regulation is there, it can have a very massive impact for the employees. Actually,
that transparency needs to be there,
and that because that regulation is not there right now, a lot of employers are taking advantage of this and making fool of lot of employees.
I mean,
right? That's the reality. That's how it is. Unfortunate, but that's how it is.
Right. So that's where you get, if that knowledge, if you don't have that knowledge, you will tend to get fooled.
Correct.
Right. So even if there's a regulation, someone can obviously scam you out of it.
It will be a little difficult because again,
without that knowledge, I don't think regulation alone is there. There needs to be some education around it. Right? And more often than not, it's the companies. Like a good company will ensure that they give you that transparency.
Right.
If you're not getting that transparency, figure out,
either don't go for it,
either don't go for it completely. If you can't trust the company, don't go for it, or try to figure out, okay, what are the variables there, why am I not getting that? There might be reasons, like if companies are going public, if they have an acquisition opportunity, sometimes companies are not completely honest about it, right? Because they can't disclose anything until they have gone through the whole cycle. So try to understand what the reasons are for them not being transparent about it, right? But never look at ESOPs as purely the way to become get rich quick, right? You need to figure out, as an investment into the company, you will be more empowered to look at it.
But look at it that way, compared to, let's say there are two companies. Let's say, for instance, Certa, right? वहाँ पर you are giving $10,000 worth of ESOPs versus talking about Amazon, जहाँ पे they're actually getting actual shares worth $10,000.
Yes.
दोनों का vesting schedule is 4 years. Right, so obviously the risk at Amazon there is no risk actually.
There's
not significantly, there is actually zero
like
risk.
Instant.
Right, it's real money actually. It's just a stocks, it's real money, and you can hold it for a longer period. If the stock price is going down, you can again hold it for another 2-3 years.
Right.
Also, you'll be saving the taxes.
Exactly.
But if we talk about a startup, those $10,000, the likelihood of that being converted into real money is less than 1%.
Right. I think it's less, it's about what kind of work they want to do, right? You can be a cog in the wheel of a large organization, or you can be, in a startup where you can get explosive growth, right? So ESOPs are a way for you to buy into the company's growth, but it's also an investment. Just joining a startup itself is an investment into your own growth.
It's not about money then. It's not about ESOP. You're not starting. You're not joining a startup because eventually, there will be a windfall. You will make money. You should consider that more as कि अगर हो गया तो ठीक है, but don't count it in yet. वो जब होगा तब देखा जाएगा.
Yes.
Right.
That is one way to look at it. Absolutely. If you get a sense of, the founders, if you have a sense of how the company is doing, if you're looking at the customers, you're looking at the customer reviews, you'll get a pretty good sense of, okay, ESOPs have some value.
If you are doing a good job, the growth opportunity is quite explosive.
It's massive. Yeah.
Right. So, it can literally explode you into a path, into a role, which can eventually lead you or help you make 10x of money what you were making earlier.
Yes.
Right. So if you are sure of yourself, you will be able to pull it off. I think there is nothing like it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So ESOPs, I think they are a good investment.
Yeah.
They're a really good investment if you know what you're getting into. Otherwise,
Right. So yeah, sounds good.